our special report, the program that gets you a ground zero view from whichever part of the country the Rajya Sabha TV cameras are travelling. This week we are in the interiors of Andhra Pradesh after the state has passed a historic legislation on the Schedule Caste and the Schedule Tribe sub-plan. What does this legislation mean? What does it entail for the marginalized groups? And how will it impact the social fabric of the country? Over the next 30 minutes, we take a closer look at all these issues. This is a landmark legislation that could change the lives of Dalits in Andhra Pradesh, who constitute almost a fifth of the state's population. The Andhra Pradesh Schedule Caste and Tribal Sub-Plan Bill 2012, passed by the Andhra Pradesh Legislative Assembly, looks to ensure comprehensive development of the downtrodden communities. For the people who've been subjected to worst forms of oppression, this legislation comes as a ray of hope. The bill will ensure steady flow of funds from welfare schemes of the state government.
I am welcoming it because after 64 years of independence, it is the first attempt in Andhra Pradesh to make the act for SC/STs as in the name of sub-plan.
Rajya Sabha TV crew travelled to the interiors of Andhra Pradesh just days after the legislation was passed. Even the man on the street who's not privy to the legal provisions of the bill had a glimmer of hope in his eyes. जो ये सप्लान आंध्र प्रदेश गवर्नमेंट लेकर आई है, सप्लान लेजिस्लेशन, एक कानून बन गया है, इससे आपकी जिंदगी में कितना बदलाव आएगा, क्योंकि ये अगले साल से इम्प्लीमेंट हो जाएगा?
अब जो ये भी अच्छा है मैडम, अब कल है ना बिल पास है ना मैडम, अच्छा है।
The living conditions of the scheduled caste and the scheduled tribes in Andhra Pradesh paint a disturbing picture. The problems and the drudgery that the SC and the STs in the state go through are not much different from those in the rest of the country. But a close look at their lives will make one realize the need for a separate legislation in Andhra Pradesh. From the tribal village, we have now reached the village of Kairili, which is about 100 kilometers from Hyderabad. And this village is heavily populated by the scheduled castes. Let's talk to some people here now. तकलीफ क्या है गांव में?
तकलीफ क्या नहीं है, मगर पानी का तकलीफ है।
पानी नहीं है और बिजली, सड़क?
सड़क भी नहीं है।
पानी का और लाइट का बहुत प्रॉब्लम है और ये स्कूल भी छोटा सा है इधर।
सबसे ज्यादा मैडम रोड, दूसरा स्कूल बिल्डिंग नहीं है यहाँ पे, टीचर सही नहीं आते और ये क्या पानी का प्रॉब्लम है।
Of the people in this village is that they do not have drinking water, they do not have proper sanitation. But let me tell you, every government department has allocated funds for drinking water, for sanitation. In fact, just to give you an example, the government department has broken up the funds for drinking water to that extent that you have a rural-urban drinking water fund, a summer drinking water fund, an urban drinking water fund. But when you come down to these villages, you find, in fact, that's an irony that the problems still exist. Enter the tribal pockets of Andhra, which seem to be years behind the world outside their habitats.
నీళ్ళు లేవు, మాకు నీళ్ళతో ఇబ్బంది ఉన్నది, చాలా మురికి గలీజు ఉన్నది ఇక్కడ. మాకు చదువుకున్న పిల్లలు ఉన్నారు, పిల్లలకు ఉద్యోగాలు లేవు.
Okay. So what is she talking about? Oh, she's talking about lack of jobs. तो जब घर में बच्चे होते हैं, जब बच्चे पैदा होते हैं तो अस्पताल आप लोग लेके जा पाते हैं लड़कियों को?
लड़के के क्या घर में जी कर देते, एक दिन काल दिन मर को गया एक बच्चा, रोड अच्छे नहीं है तो.
It's not only in Andhra Pradesh but across the country, scheduled castes and scheduled tribes are trailing behind when it comes to amenities, infrastructure, health and education. But before we give you the details of this historic scheduled castes and scheduled tribes sub-plan legislation of Andhra Pradesh, we'll give you a short glimpse of the condition of the downtrodden in 2 other states. Take a look. Enter the state of Odisha in a small village around Kendrapada. This is the dormitory for a girls' hostel for scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. Structure of the building is ready, but the basic amenities are missing here. The government guidelines have banned 2-tier beds in dormitories, but here they still exist. The guidelines also prescribe a cap on the number of people staying in one room, but such things do not matter in a place like this. This hostel lacks basic amenities for the students.
रास्ता घाटर सुविधा नहीं तेणु से नहीं पहुँचवा चिकित्सा करवा ये सब आमको असुविधा हुए.
Let's move on to Uttar Pradesh. This is an Ambedkar hostel for girls in Jaunpur district. There are no girls housed here at the moment due to safety concerns. Therefore, this place is offered to the boys.
हम लोग मेस की व्यवस्था यहाँ पर नहीं है, इसलिए हम लोग को मतलब बहुत परेशानियाँ उठाने पड़.
उनके साथ तमाम तरह के भेदभाव होते हैं. उनको किस तरह दौड़ाया जाता है, कभी एडमिशन के नाम पर तो कभी आय प्रमाण पत्र और जाति प्रमाण पत्र बनाने के नाम पर.
It's very clear that the funds are allocated, but allocations are notional. Now, India has slipped down on the Human Development Index from 119 to 134. So how does a strong economy like India reflect a poor human index? It indicates that the growth and the opportunities are not reaching the people. There is not only insufficient fund allocation, but allocations are not resulting in quality expenditure. Funds for scheduled castes and scheduled tribes lie unutilized in most states. A confidential report submitted by Cabinet Subcommittee appointed by the Andhra Pradesh government revealed serious lapses in implementing the sub-plan for SC/STs. The committee noted that there was no evidence of systematic planning in any of the government departments in the state regarding the SC/ST sub-plans. The report says SCs and STs in the state do not have proper access to land, education, nutrition and health care. There are almost 50 lakh scheduled tribes in Andhra Pradesh of 35 tribes, which constitute almost 7% of the state's population, according to Census 2001. Andhra's SC and ST sub-plan legislation will come into effect in the new financial year. The Andhra government could spend only 12.24% of the allocation to the SCs, while the figure is a meagre 5.98% when it comes to the scheduled tribes. Though the Planning Commission has issued guidelines on fund utilization, no government so far has achieved full utilization of the allotted money.
In many cases, allocation is not made. The earmarking is not done in proportion to this share of the population. That is the one problem. Second problem is whatever the allocation is made is typically notional in the sense that it is there and it can be easily diverted to other purposes.
As the general development programs could not cater to the socio-economic development of the SCs and the STs, a special component plan, which was later renamed as the Scheduled Caste and the Scheduled Tribe sub-plan, was formulated. The Special Component sub-plan is an important intervention by the planners for socio-economic and educational development of scheduled castes and tribes. The funds are utilized for the improvement of working and living conditions of the SCs and the STs. It was introduced in the 6th five-year plan with two objectives. They are implementation of income-generating programs and providing basic amenities and essential services. So So what do the governments across the country do? Now the money which is meant for the welfare of the tribals and the Dalits is diverted towards works like beautification of lakes, building of flyovers. In fact, even during the Commonwealth Games, you saw how SC/ST funds were diverted for building a greater city. Thus, the Andhra Pradesh government decided to give statutory status to the Schedule Caste and Schedule Tribe Sub-Plan and introduced the AP Schedule Caste and Tribal Sub-Plan Planning, Allocation and Utilization of Financial Resources Bill in 2012. In a special 3-day assembly session, main opposition party TDP insisted on incorporating provisions to allocate funds to SCs along different categories. But in a rare show of unity, opposition parties such as Telangana Rashtriya Samiti, Vyas Congress Party, MIM, CPI and CPIM, including Lok Satta, ensured that the legislation sailed through.
For the sake of the criticism, we should not criticize. Let us see how they are going to implement it. Ultimate aim of the government and ultimate aim of the opposition is to 22%, 21% or 21.6% or 5%, whatever they are supposed to give, SC/STs, they separately demarcate it to the SC/STs welfare.
With the passage of the bill, Andhra Pradesh becomes the first state to give legal status to the SC/ST sub-plan. The draft bill was prepared on the basis of the recommendations by the Cabinet Subcommittee headed by Deputy Chief Minister Damodar Raj Narasimha. Andhra Legislative Assembly adopted the bill that earmarks 1/5 of the state's annual budget for the scheduled caste and the scheduled tribes.
In 2006, again, the Planning Commission advises to the state governments to form apex bodies, monitoring system. And similar in 2010 and 11, again Planning Commission intervention and giving directions to the state governments to form a nodal agency, strengthen the nodal agency. Yet from last so many years, primarily the amount proportionate to the population, even though it has been allocated, one major issue is the amount got diverted.
Let's now take a look at the salient features of this legislation and also the institutional mechanisms which shall be put in place once the Act comes into force from next year. The legislation contains several key provisions such as earmarking a portion of the total plan outlay proportionate to the SC/ST population. Sub-plan will include only such schemes that secure direct and quantifiable benefits to individuals or households. Nodal agencies under tribal welfare and social welfare ministries will do regular appraisals of the schemes. Nodal agencies will ensure transparency from every department. They will present an annual report on implementation of the schemes. The genesis of the ST Sub-Plan Fund goes back to 1975-76 when Indira Gandhi introduced the concept under the 5th Plan. Various problems came to the fore as far as the analysis by the Planning Commission was concerned, new strategies were adopted and finally the National Advisory Council gave recommendations to the Prime Minister under the 12th Plan. Under the institutional mechanism, there will be a State Council under the Chief Minister for SCs and the STs, which shall meet twice a year. This State Council shall advise the state government on policy matters relating to special schemes. Now, in this entire scheme of things, how does one ensure transparency and accountability? For this, there would be schemes for either rewarding incentives for commendable performance or disincentives for proven negligence. State Council shall also recommend reallocation of funds, review the implementation and do monitoring. It will also identify impediments in implementation in coordination with other departments. The government is mulling over a Dalit Research Centre which will carry out the assessment exercise of the SC and the ST population throughout the state. And ultimately, this research centre will also be a think tank for the nodal agency.
Formation of a Dalit Adivasi Research Center. It should be the think tank for the nodal agency.
So these tribals and Dalits who are beautiful people, they have been subjected to worse forms of oppression since years. But this particular legislation brings a hope for them. Let's take a break at this point in time. More when we come back. you're watching our special report on the Scheduled Tribes and Scheduled Caste sub-plan in the state of Andhra Pradesh. Now let's get you more facets of this legislation. The historic legislation may have been passed by the Andhra government, but the intellectuals say that the legislation has no teeth. In fact, questions are being raised as to how the allocation of funds proportional to the population would be done.
This legislation is seen as a major step towards social justice. Activists and economists have welcomed the legislation but have raised several questions regarding the implementation.
If you go into the details of the act, there are so many lacunas. The first thing, there is no clear mention about the proportional representation.
Okay.
So they are telling that we are giving a funds or allotting, we are going to allot the funds on par with the proportional representation of the Dalits and tribals.
Right.
So the perception of the proportional representation of government is different from that of the people's perception of the proportional representation.
Experts say the legislation guarantees allocation, not expenditure in proportion to the population. In fact, it excludes certain departments from implementing the sub-plan. The bill also lays a ceiling on the amount of money allocated to the sub-plan, thereby making it difficult to utilize the unspent money of the previous year.
If 15% or 21% of the budget is allocated to SCTs, tomorrow backward classes may also demand for allocation of 60% of the total budget towards OBCs.
Now, within the SCs and the STs in Andhra Pradesh, there are a number of subgroups, and the questions are being raised as to how this legislation will allocate funds to these subgroups.
Government should take the consideration of the population of each and every subcaste.
Right.
And the next important point, there is no mention about the people, those who are living in a scheduled areas of the scheduled caste people.
Okay.
SCs are living in scheduled areas, along with the tribals.
Right.
But there is no mention about the scheduled caste people, those who are living in scheduled areas. How these funds are going to helpful to the people of the scheduled areas of scheduled caste people. Right. So this is the major drawback.
In the case of Andhra Pradesh, the expenditure on tribals has declined over the years despite a proportional allocation. For example, in 2007 and 2008, the state plan outlay was 20,500 crore. The expenditure was just 9.03% of the amount. In 2008-2009, the state plan outlay was 44,000 crore. Expenditure was just 5.12%. In 2009-2010, the plan outlay was 33,496 crore, of which spending was just 5.14%. In 2010-2011, 36,800 crore was the outlay, of which a meager 5.10% was spent. In 2011-2012, 43,000 crore was allocated. The expenditure was just about 5.86%.
Now, I'll give you a small example. For instance, in the 2012 and 13 state budget, the amount allocated for the special component plan was diverted to the non-Dalit areas. Now, these kind of diversions and cuts for the last 19 years amount to a whopping 26,000 crore. So you can well imagine the kind of benefits which the SCs and the STs have been devoid of.
So what difference will the new legislation make in the lives of scheduled castes and scheduled tribes? Let's listen to Chief Minister Kiran Kumar Reddy.
The idea is a welcome idea, but do you believe that the legislation is also going to be a blind endorsement in any way?
Not at all. We are very specific and we are very clear what we want to achieve by this legislation. So now we are trying to only put it in the correct perspective, to focus our attention to see that the scheduled tribes and scheduled castes are made strengthened enough to compete with others and to bridge the gap of and giving them equal opportunity compared to others. So we are trying to focus it.
But is it right that you would not have an ombudsman to take care of?
See, here the Lokayuta is himself an ombudsman. Now we've got the Lokayuta judge here, who himself is an ombudsman. So that is the reason we did not require an ombudsman.
But what is the biggest challenge in the implementation of the whole thing?
We have to set the systems in the right direction. See, identifying the gaps, that is going to be a big task. So we want to have a continuous research going on in identifying who is the poorest of the poor, even among the STs and SCs.
Andhra goes to polls in 2014, the same year as the general election, so obviously this legislation will have a political impact. But most significantly for now, it's a fight for the credit. Who takes the credit for the passage of this legislation?
After the legislation is passed, leaders cutting across party lines now realize the tremendous political mileage the bill could fetch in the next assembly elections. And hence, every leader has started claiming credit for it.
You see, the whole credit will go to the association and the other SC association mainly. It will go to them because they are the people who brought it actually.
Right.
There must be separate SC/ST sub-plan and this credit will go to them.
I think with this bill Congress gained a lot. But we have a hope that this bill is going to cheat through this, saying that look, we have money, but this money is not really going to help where government wants to take.
The SCs and STs in Andhra Pradesh are known to vote for the Congress. But after Vyas Rajshekhar Reddy's demise, a split in Dalit votes was expected. Congress leaders are now hopeful that the new legislation will bring Dalits back to its fold.
When Vyas Rajshekhar Reddy was the leader of the opposition, he promised to bring in the legislation if voted back to power. But when he assumed power, no action was taken till 2007.
Andhra Pradesh is the first state to give a statutory status to the SC/ST sub-plan. This move is putting pressure on other states to have similar legislations.
Definitely, it will be pressure not only on other states, but also on the central government, because there are clear-cut guidelines issued by Planning Commission. Union government as well as state governments will have to earmark funds under Schedule Caste sub-plan and tribal sub-plan.
Time for a short break now. Don't go away. We'll come back with many more aspects of Andhra SC/ST legislation 2012. Back in a moment. Welcome back. You're watching our special report on the Scheduled Tribes and Scheduled Caste sub-plan in the state of Andhra Pradesh.
Dalit rights groups have welcomed the Andhra initiative, but they say there's also a need for a uniform law in the country which can track allocations for the SCs and STs. In fact, a draft legislation is already in the pipeline.
A draft bill has already been drafted on the lines and looking at also the gaps on the existing draft that has been come at the AP. And then we have already presented this and we would be taking this forward.
21 ministries of the central government have a direct role in SC affairs. As per government data, of their gross budgetary support of 3,91,027 crore, 37,113 crore is earmarked for SCs and STs. Dalit groups say this is not enough.
Till now what has been, they have just had this as a policy, and that policy is there as a shell. And in the policy, when it's translated into kind of actual programs and mechanisms to implement it, there are tremendous not only gaps, but there is a resistance at several levels to plan for the SCs or STs.
Social Justice Ministry and the Rural Development Ministry are at loggerheads as wages paid to Narega workers from scheduled castes are being counted as money spent on SC welfare. Social Justice and Empowerment Minister Shailja Kumari has written to the Planning Commission questioning the rationale of including 10,000 crore of NREGA funds in the SC sub-plan.
The issue is, how do we calculate that shortfall from 16%, which is supposed to be the earmarking, and the actual allocation done? That gap, how do we compute that? One contention, one view is that, and this is the view taken by Ministry of Rural Development and some others, the view taken is that of this gap, actual gap is much less, because you have to make you have to make proper accounting of the money which is going to Schedule Caste under the NREGA and the money which is going under PMGSY. Now this is being contested by the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment, and this issue is going to be sorted out very soon.
The planning process still remains the biggest challenge. There's no appraisal of the sub-plans. There's no clarity on the schemes which are permissible or non-permissible. The fact that the funds are non-lapsable is only on paper, and there is no participation from the community leaders. So all these concerns need to be addressed.
Many states have reported diversions of SC/ST funds for other purposes. According to the demands for grants of the state, Odisha government has diverted 101 crore of the SC funds for the construction of jail houses, court buildings, police barracks and fire services. Similarly, 976 crore of the SC/ST funds in Odisha have been used for the mega and medium irrigation projects. Delhi government spent 350 crore on buses, 12 crore on jails and 286 crore on hospitals. Rajasthan government spent 385 crore of the SC/ST funds on general education, 66 crore for family welfare and 117 crore for the construction of roads and bridges.
It's not just these three states, but money meant for the SCs and the STs across the country does not reach them. Despite all the mechanisms in place and also the provisions in the budget, they are devoid of the benefit they deserve. Had the money reached the right destination, you can imagine the quantum of progress the downtrodden could have made in the country.
So the schemes need to be formulated, institutional mechanisms need to be put in place, reviews and audits need to happen. This is exactly what the Andhra SC/ST sub-plan legislation is offering. And this could definitely help in improving the lot of SCs and STs in the state.
There's no doubt about the fact that the bill is a welcome idea. It's a remarkable piece of legislation in its intent, but it wouldn't be easy for the Andhra government to roll out the law, as a humongous assessment exercise would be required. Well, it's a beginning of another milestone which perhaps could change the social fabric of the entire country. On that note, time for us to say goodbye. See you next time with another issue from another place. From our entire team, thanks for watching.